Okay, folks. Assuming my phone doesn't fall off my driver's wheel, just gonna try and put this recording together. I know it's been like a super long time since I uploaded anything, and honestly, like I haven't really had much to talk about in terms of Nofap. Um, you can probably tell I've been having a difficult time still. Some of it I do chalk up to the whole, like, being away from it for significantly enough stretches of time, with the exception of a handful of slip-ups, major and minor, and then, getting sort of re-exposed to it and it kind of being this whole sort of like overwhelming rush, because honestly, like, it's not like I'm getting any action or so, that would serve as a counterbalance to that. But some of it's just has been that. Some of it's been other things. Having a bit of a readjustment and my schedule and new stressors, rising to the fore. I've gone through maybe like, I think a couple, like 2, maybe almost 3 week stretches, and then I would basically relapse and go back to the habit, and then I end up binging for a while, and then, eventually kind of like basically like the allure of it will wear off, and I get back to that sort of like burnt out with it sort of a state, and then start getting some traction again on Nofap, and eventually it seems like and this and I have to say, like, in my experience, it will go away, and eventually, like, we'll get back on there. It's just a matter of like how many days, weeks, months will I waste before I actually quote unquote get back on the path and start making some serious traction. Not just in Nofap, but in terms of life, where I'm focusing that time, energy, and effort on other things other than this habit, this problem of mine that's been there for quite a while in my life. Even sort of almost like waiting in the wings during those stretches of time when I've been on a significant Nofap streak, or sort of like phase, almost like waiting in the wings, waiting to jump back into my life and bring with it all its all its different influences and effects. But there's been a couple things. Well, I say actually more like 3 things. They haven't really eaten up my time outside of that. For one thing, started taking classes again. I'm trying to really go like serious with it this time. I still be going part-time, but 2 classes per semester. I've done the math, and assuming I get nothing less than a B, which is, that's the baseline, really. Grad school is like the most basic. Engineering grad school is the most basic like goal, and they want nothing less than B's in these courses. Obviously, the higher up I go, from a B to a B plus to an A minus to an A, more and more doors open, up to and including medical school, and with that, possibly of a career in different fields, different endeavors, up to and including like the ultimate dream that I've had all my life, which I have talked about on and off. I don't really want to like blab about it right now, because it's almost like the kind of thing that it's only worth talking about it if it's an actual possibility, and you're not just like sounding like some almost like stereotypical 10-year-old kid who's like, when I grow up, I want to be blah blah blah, sort of a deal. But yeah, it's been classes. So far, I've been doing pretty well. These are some like major retake classes. They're classes that I passed them back when I was going for my undergrad degree, but it was like I got grades that were essentially good enough for me to get my bachelor's, but not good enough for graduate school. So, in some sense, they're refreshers. In some sense, they're me just sort of raising my GPA, boosting my GPA for admissions purposes. Like one of them in particular, it's part of a series of courses, and technically speaking, I could take the ultimate final course that they're really looking at for admissions purposes, but I've been like so out of practice with this kind of material, and like its pure form, basically, um, mathematics. This being calculus one, I'll just throw that out there. That if I try to take differential equations, which is almost like the capstone of lower division math requirements for engineers, as far as I've seen, for at least the majority of engineering majors. I know they might throw discrete mathematics in there if you're going into like computer engineering or something like that. But well, I could pull out my transcripts and get into DiffEq. I'm so like out of practice with it, and when I did go and finally take it way back in undergrad, it was just like I barely survived that class. And if I'm going to go get a master's, which I need to get in order to get out of sort of the career funk that I'm in, there's different ways out of it for different people, but for me, like I need to get that master's at the very least, and if I'm going to go do that, then I have to get nothing less than a B in differential equations, and I don't see myself being able to do that right now. It just would require too much. I need to refresh a whole bunch of my knowledge, get all these gaps and holes filled in, get myself almost like warmed up in a sense, and in truth, like I need to really raise my overall GPA, especially for the last 60 units of technical coursework, which if I do what I'm doing now, 10 units per semester, 2 years worth, that's 40 units plus, even if it's like plus the last semester that I did in undergrad or so, assuming I get nothing less than B's, like it'll raise my GPA up enough that I'll be able to clear that threshold and get in. And then beyond that, it's studying for taking the GRE and just keeping on that track record of nothing less than B's in my classes, and I can get a master's degree. Obviously, I want to be getting more than just B's in all these classes, because if I want to go into graduate school, I've got to basically hit the ground running, and I got to be so built up that it's almost like going through boot camp, where like you go in and you're like whatever weight you are, and you come out and you're like 30 or 40 pounds lighter, not only because of all the strict exercise and exertions and sleep deprivation and going through the crucible or hell week or whatever, whatever form of boot camp you can think of, but also having like the dietary restrictions, the caloric intake restrictions, that sort of thing. Like you gotta build yourself up beforehand, so that when you go in and it's sort of like it starts breaking you down, you have enough of a reserve of energy and musculature and stamina and so on, that you make it to the end. And I can't really be just going in. I know baseline is B's, but I can't be going in with just that in reality, because like I said, I need to start off at the top, so that if it has sort of like a crescendo, me going down like that, that I'm it's almost like making it to home base, being able to slide in just fast enough, so that like the the, what do you call it? What's the term? Basically that the guy on the other team can't, the catcher, that he can't, tap you out. Basically, you're fast enough that you get to the plate before he's able to, tap you, and then you're out. That sort of thing. So what else? That's one thing. The other thing has been work, obviously. I've been having a bit of trouble, to put it lightly. It's like I've been pushing to get into all these different roles, and I've been growing, and I pretty much have mastered the entirety of the workflow, been involved with everything along the way. Definitely improved in a lot of ways, to the extent that they were willing to put me on different, responsibilities and such, and build me up and that sort of deal. But now I've been on this, it's basically this high profile workflow, and it's one of those things where, like, if something goes wrong or work doesn't get done, whatever the reason is, the director, the manager, upper management, they get to see it, and they're, coming at your supervisor, your lead, they're coming at you going like, what's going on here, and obviously it's like best if you've got documentation, so you have, hey, look at this is what happened, sort of a deal. But I've had some instances of that where in a lot of cases, like, it wasn't, and I'm not just trying to, like, deflect blame or whatever, it literally, like, wasn't necessarily, like, my fault that things didn't get done. We had huge blockers that stopped the process from going forward, even starting actually for like 3 to 4 hours out of the day, and then you have a 12-hour shift that's like a third of your day gone, third or fourth, fourth to a third of your day gone, and you can only get so much done. And with me, I know that if I don't get up and at them, in the morning, go and get the momentum, like, things slow. I slow down, and kind of like my time management skills, which I've worked on, they kind of start slipping away, and you combine that with the fact of me trying to adjust to taking these courses, which I know I need to take these courses. It's not a matter of if or do I want to. It's like, because of a number of things I've sort of observed at work. I feel like I gotta get through this rough patch right now, and I've been readjusting. I've figured certain things out, like what, on Saturdays I have a lab class, and okay, after my lab class, maybe I'll have to take a nap or so, but if I can get up, and something I've been doing, getting up and getting a ton of work done, knocking out so many, things for the week, then I don't feel like I have to, during the work week, divide my time up, between the two, that, okay, I'm a week ahead, or I'm 2 weeks ahead, taking care of class stuff on, on Saturday. So when I'm at work, then it's, 100% focused on work. Excuse me. And I was kind of having a bit of a difficulty starting off the semester. Not only because, admittedly, I did kind of drag my feet at getting registered for classes, getting transcripts, and getting prerequisites cleared, that sort of deal, because I wasn't even sure if I was going to be starting classes, really going for it this time. But just because there's that adjustment period of, okay, like, it's not just work, it's work and school, and how do we divide this up so that we're not slipping up at work and not fulfilling our responsibilities there, but also not slipping up at school and wasting our time and money there, and not fulfilling our responsibilities there. And it's like, I need the job because I need money to pay for this, that, and the other. But with the classes, it's like, you know, I'll what's the way I want to put it? I'll cut through all sort of the fluff and just say that, among many other things I've observed at work is that, essentially it's kind of like, unless I am super qualified, meaning I have an extremely well-developed skill set, things like programming and let's just say mechanical design and operations and stuff like that. And in particular, unless I have like, something like a master's degree, let's just say. Essentially, I'm sort of like left in a situation where, not only am I just like not, sorry, somebody ran into a garbage can in front of me, but, where I'm not really like, I don't really stick out from the crowd. And when you're one of like, let's say 100 other people who have bachelor's degrees in a job that used to require a bachelor's degree, but now they're willing to hire people who have associates or who have high school degrees. And you're competing with folks who can be very charismatic. You end up in a situation where, butt kissing and brown nosing really end up ruling the day and getting people into positions that, either you have been after for quite a while, but ended up going to people who knew how to schmooze the right person, how to basically weasel information and opportunities out of, people higher up, such that they gained the skills and knowledge they needed and the connections in order to get into that position. Or they're able to sort of like turn the dynamics of the environment against you. And while social skills are definitely an important factor in life, and it's something that I definitely want to expand upon and work on. I've dealt with like a significant number of frustrations to the point that, especially I know it's a common factor across companies, but man, the company I work at, like I've seen enough people schmooze their way into roles that they didn't have any qualifications for, or were underqualified for. Like, someone with a biology degree becoming an engineer, and there I am with an engineering degree, and like going like, man, it's not just like how the hell did that happen, but thinking back to all the times I, deprived myself of sleep and was working so hard to study for these engineering classes and getting an engineering degree, and then some biology major shows up and gets that engineering job, and it's just like, what do I gotta do? It's kind of like, I mean, you could replace his job with girl, and it would be the same thing. Like, what's he got that I haven't got? How did he, get his way into that? That situation where he's with her and I'm not. Like, though in that situation, I think it would make more sense to me to think like, oh, this guy's got social skills. Oh, it makes sense. Like he was able to say the right thing and present himself in the right way that she fell for him. But I'm looking at it and it's almost seeing like I gotta be so qualified and highly skilled and distinguished that it becomes less and less a matter of me having to schmooze my way up the chain of command at the current job and having the kinds of things that will open doors at other companies so that other companies are competing for me. Because right now, while I do have experience working at this company and another company as well, um, man, it really is like it's really become, to varying degrees at varying times, a more or less stifling environment where I feel I'm being pigeonholed into just being an operator as opposed to becoming an engineer in the official sense, or um, a research scientist, or something that's more stimulating, better paying, has less manual work to it, better ROI, etc., etc. And like, you know, it sucks that I had to put that much effort into it to get a master's degree when there's folks out there with junk degrees like outdoor leadership who are getting into positions and whatnot, work weaseling their way in, or they have degrees in psychology or something like that, and it's like to a certain extent, I get the value in some of that stuff, but on the same token, I'm just kind of like, none of those skill sets would be worth anything or would have the means or an environment within which they could flourish or be used if it wasn't for scientists and engineers developing technologies and creating businesses around those technologies that would create job opportunities for people with those junk degrees. But I can't do much about that. Best thing I can do is hold down this job and get into graduate school and get that master's degree, if not more than that. And beyond that, the third thing that's really been going on is a bit of sort of like personal research into family history. Beyond, the genealogy book that I already got, which I think I made a video about that, but I don't think I ever really uploaded it. But this sort of genealogy thing is like way closer to home because it has to do with my grandfather. I've been researching stuff with like going all the way back to the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, and then I decided to basically sort of try and work on something that not only closer to home with someone I actually knew, person to person, that sort of deal, but for which there's a lot more, resources available, and it allowed me to sort of cut my teeth in terms of, researching family involvement in different wars and that sort of thing. And basically, it was about a year ago, I did a cursory search on the National Archives website, found my grandpa's service number and his date of enlistment in the United States Navy during World War II. He went in like right out of high school, and I'll be honest, I kind of sat on it to a certain extent. I mean, I did contact the National Archives, and I had to get some info together, and I did sit on it for a while. A bunch of stuff happened, but I finally got around to contacting them, and like within I think about a month of contacting them, if not less, actually, they were able to. Actually, yeah, I think it was. I think it was actually like more like at most like a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. I can go look at the the email timestamps and all that, date stamps, whatever. But basically, they got back to me. They found his official military personnel file. I went ahead and paid for it to have scanned in, and including the photo negative of his induction photo. When he was inducted into the Naval Reserve, and I got all of that. Started reading through it. Man, it's like I got to finally learn so much about him that I didn't get to learn about him, when he was alive, because he was only, well, he was only 66 when he passed away. And I was about to say he was only in my life for so many years, but like, that just kind of seems so like self-centered way to put it. But I was 5, I was like, how many? I think I was 5 months short of turning 6. So I was 5 years old, almost approaching 5.5 years old when he passed away. And that was like the first time I think I really experienced like the death of someone close to me. And I only have a handful of memories of him, from when I was a kid. And and this is, I mean, obviously I remember him as my grandpa, so obviously he was like, super nice to me. I went fishing with him. I sort of went hunting with him. I remember like handling the rifle or the shotgun, but I was, sitting in the car, and he went off and got himself a pheasant and brought it back, and it was like, oh, it's his dinner, sort of a thing. I remember fishing with him, and then caught this little fish. I think it was like about that big or so, and my grandma, she cooked it for us, and then we got to have it, and I kind of remember the sound of his voice and his mannerisms and that sort of deal. I'm sure they have some videos somewhere, of him at one point in time or another. But needless to say, like, I only knew so much about him, and what little I did know that wasn't stuff that I remember of him. Was when he was around me. The stuff that I heard from my mom or my grandma, and he talked a little bit here and there about his short, well, I don't know if he said it was short, but he his time in the service during World War II and what that was all like. And he'd mentioned like a couple of things here and there, like being in the Caribbean, but I think he was at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba at one point, but then like never knew where he was actually stationed and things of that nature. And had a vague understanding of what he did, what his role was, and that sort of thing. And I got this, and I started reading through it, and a lot of stuff matched up to what I was told, and then there was like sort of the fleshing out of things that I didn't know about, and nothing bad actually. I mean, honestly, like nothing to be ashamed of, nothing like, oh, here's why he never talked. No, it was just he did 2 years. The war ended. He could have stayed. He chose to come back home, to not re-enlist. But the real eye-opening stuff was almost like bittersweet, really. Because it served as sort of a lead into some, a series of conversations I had with my grandma, where she revealed a lot of things about the family back then, going back through my, my great grandparents, his parents, and then my great uncles and great aunt, and the family dynamics were like, and how much of a similar situation, it was to how my family is nowadays. And really the bad side, I guess you could say. And then it's kind of like why whenever we talk about things with my family, and how she said the best thing I ever did was getting out of my family's home and moving away from them, and she could see the sort of night and day difference about how, like, once I got out of there, how much I changed overnight, and practically was able to really start getting my life together, and the progress I made, and how much different my trajectory has been the last, let's say, several years, compared to when I was there, and then compare that to, you know, my family, what they've been up to, what they've been doing, where they've been going or rather not going, and, you know, that sort of a deal. Because, long story short, my grandpa had a very promising career in the Navy. He was the kind of guy with a whole lot of potential. And I almost feel like I'm reading like word for word out of The Rational Male, Volume 1, probably, you know, certain parts of Volume 2 and, you know, Volume 3, but, like, you know, the whole talk of, like, potential, you know, a man's potential, and how it can get wasted, and if you don't maximize your potential by a certain age, you know, etc., things can and or will happen. And I'm gonna turn this off and turn it back on to reset it, or try to. But he had a promising career in the Navy. You know, we're talking like, and I'm sure if I throw some of these terms out there, some folks who maybe watch, like, from what I gather, Dark Magician, you know, did or is doing, you know, his stint in the military, so he probably understands some of these things. But he was the kind of guy who, you know, he went in, he was a seaman recruit, got through boot camp, promoted to, let me see, I think he goes from seaman recruit to, I don't know if they did or do have a seaman third class, but I definitely remember seeing in the paper a seaman second class to first class, and then to his highest rating was aviation ordnanceman third class, which basically it's a petty officer third class in the aviation ordnanceman, like, community. And he was like 19 or 20 years old and already a non-commissioned officer. Obviously, that's not on the level of the commissioned officer, where it's like, oh, you know, the Senate has to appoint you and you have to get approved, or something like the president has to appoint you, or you know, some authority figure. And I can't remember the specifics of it. It's been several years, but basically you have to be appointed to it and then approved by it. They don't necessarily have to do it on a one person basis, but it's more like we're going to approve that there are so many ensigns this year, and, you know, therefore so many commissions available, and you have to be appointed to a commission. It was like you had to be appointed as a non-commissioned officer, but it's, I don't want to, like, downplay it, because I'm really not. Because, you know, for him to be 20 years old, and I read the papers, and it was like, you have to be appointed to this, you know. It might not be, like I said, you know, after repeating myself or belabor the point, it might not be like somebody, you know, appointed to a commission as an ensign in the Navy, or as a second lieutenant in the Marines, or, you know, a second lieutenant in the Army, or, you know, Air Force, or something like that. But it's still like you have to be appointed. Your commanding officer has to look at, you know, not only, you know, all your scores, but they have to, like, know your comportment, your general reputation, have seen you in action, so to speak, and been like, I want to appoint that person. That person, you know, we're going to make them a non-commissioned officer in charge of, you know, a team or a squad or something of that nature. They have to, like, pick you out, essentially. Excuse me. And for it to be, at the time, you know, wartime Navy going into peacetime Navy still, you know, for him to be at that level. And he essentially gave up that career, or that chance at a career. And, you know, back then, I mean, you know, the word opportunity, like, I don't know what that meant back then, but I look at things now, and, you know, it's interesting that when I talk to my dad about these things, he, like, agrees with me that, like, you know, if your grandpa had stayed in the Navy, like, his life would have been so much better. He would have all these chances. He was really going places. You know, my dad always noticed that, like, my grandpa was a smart guy. You could, like, tell he had all this potential, all this intelligence, and yet he ends up working, you know, at a grocery store, and he gave up this promising career in the Navy so he could go back to his hometown and basically take care of his deadbeat family, you know. I don't like speaking ill of the dead because all of his siblings and his parents have been gone, and they're still my blood relations, and it's not like they did what that scumbag cousin from my dad's side of the family did, but nonetheless they screwed him over. He was roped back, to coming back to his hometown. um, from what I can tell, and I'm hoping, the handful of people who watch my channel consistently, they know that I'm not calling my grandfather a liar or anything of that nature. I want, I hope people understand that. But when I read the papers, it looked like he had to fabricate some sort of story to explain why he needed to get his, um, uh, why he needed to get back to there, because he had to go through this process of like getting discharged ahead of time. I think originally he was supposed to be there for 4 years in the Navy, but then he did the 2 years, and then it was like, oh, the war ended and they were demobilized. He decided to kind of try and get out with the demobilization because, oh, I got to get back to home to take care of my family, because basically his family was getting evicted from the house they were renting, and he had to basically put in there some reason saying like, oh, the landlord's house caught on fire and he needs this house, something or other, so where they're being evicted. But I think the truth is probably that his father, who was a raging alcoholic, my great grandfather, basically probably drank all the rent money, so to speak. As the, I guess that's an expression, or maybe I'm making one up right now, but as I would put it, drink all the rent money, and then they were getting evicted. And this is why when people talk about, oh, he must have been privileged or so, because always factors like, there may have been some of that there. I'm sure, it was the 40s and the 50s. I mean, things were a lot different back then in many ways. Many ways not, but it's a whole other can of worms. But he had to take out a GI loan in order to get them a house. So it's not this whole like, oh, I'm building intergenerational wealth with this GI loan that I'm getting because I have all these, factors working in my favor. It was like he never got to enjoy any of that or partake of any of that, really, because it went to taking care of his family, his parents. His dad, like I said, raging alcoholic, never wanted to work, never could hold down a job. His nice but enabling mother, his deadbeat, essentially like, moochy mooch, parasitic, siblings, would never work a job or pay their way or anything of that nature, and all that falling on his shoulders and him feeling obligated to do that. And I've been having to grapple with all these revelations, because there's very few things that will make me cry these days. And I'll be honest with you, like I cried my eyes out, so to speak. Actually, I cried pretty hard after I got done talking with my grandma about all these things and just kind of putting it all together, because I mean, like I said, he was a man of such great potential. He had the nobility and the virtue to go, to serve and defend his nation. He displayed all these, like, you read through the papers and whatnot, and people making these remarks on, their perception of him as a member of the service, and member of the Navy and all that. And then you realize that he gave up all of that so he could go back to his hometown and work at a grocery, take up the same job he had in high school, so that he can make enough money to make rent, so that his deadbeat loser family could just scrape on by in life. And I think the moment where he was able to free himself of them was honestly when he got married to my grandma, and it got more solidified once he had my mother. And the sad thing is, by that time, it was too little too late for him to really fulfill his potential. Like, my dad was of the opinion, and I mentioned this to my grandma, that he always thought grandpa could, my grandpa could have been an engineer or a doctor. And my grandpa, he had dreams of becoming a dentist. And if he had stayed in the Navy and stuck to his guns on that, I mean, I'm willing to bet money they would have put him through OCS, Officer Candidate School. They would have put him, through college, paid for him to go to college, sent him off to there. He probably would have been able to put in a request to go to dental school. And with his, ratings and his marks and all that, his performance, they would have been like, sure thing, you'll be a dentist in the Navy, or you'll be a doctor in the Navy, sort of thing. And, and just seeing all these parallels, this is why my grandma said, and this is why, talking to me, like, this is why, all these times I tell you, don't let your family do that to you. Don't let them rope you into their problems. Don't let them drag you back to where they're at and, make you into their servant, that sort of thing. And, for several years, they did that kind of stuff to me. And I finally got out of there. And, I've had this rage, this frustration, this rage, this anger, this, sort of fire in me to never let that happen. And now it's like, I don't know, it almost seems like it's like, almost like it's genetic, that I'm like so vehemently against going back to that. And I know it from personal experience, but also, it's reinforced by this knowledge of what happened to my grandpa, because I feel so bad for him. And it's sort of and people might say, oh, he wasn't a victim, he did this to himself, da 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 da. And, there's a kernel of truth to that, because he believed in certain things, but, and he wanted to sort of hold on to that and stick to that. And I've been there. But, at the same time, it's like that his service in the Navy inspires me. What he did for that part of his life inspires me. There's the cautionary tale of what happened when, some deadbeat losers were able to take a hold of his idealism and use it against him, or use it for their own good. Maybe not maliciously against him, but, with sort of a apathetic, we don't care how this really affects him, here's how we can make him useful for us sort of a way. And I've been really having to process that sort of stuff, because, it's created even a greater drive in me to succeed at what I'm doing now, because as much as I'm doing this for myself, I'm at least in part doing this for my grandpa, because he sacrificed so damn much. And I want to make sure that it wasn't for nothing. That's, also part of the reason why, going through his military records and such, like, I found that he was eligible for at least a couple awards. And I've been working on putting together sort of a packet to submit. And I would have to have either my grandmother or my mother sign off on it. And having discussed in detail in the past, I think, like, what my mother is like, how she's very narcissistic, makes everything about herself, is spiteful about so many damn things and whatnot. Like, she would want to treat these awards as if they were hers when they're actually for my grandpa. I'd rather involve my grandmother, but, she's 92, and it's kind of like it's now or never, and I have to get everything together. And, it's like, if I could get these medals for him that, that were his, that he earned, it's like I could get him some of the recognition and appreciation that he never got while he was alive, a little bit of it. And I think through this process, I've learned the importance of certain things, and like why my grandma tells me, don't let them do this to you. You go pursue your dreams, and you pursue them to the utmost, and you put in the effort, you do the work, you put in the mileage, that sort of thing. But at the same time, value your freedom, value your dreams. Don't let them take them from you. You know, value that hard work and that effort. And when you do succeed, value what you've gained. So you're not just like throwing it away for a bunch of ingrates. Because, you know, with the exception of, I think, one of my grandpa's brothers, nobody in that family really did anything such that anyone would be remembering them, you know, 30 years after they passed away. I mean, I mean that with no malice in my heart. I truly find it way more sad than, you know, something that makes me angry. At least at them, you know. My mother, my father, my sister, that's a whole nother, you know, can of worms, even though in many ways it's sort of a replica in one form or another of that, you know, environment, that sort of dynamic. But man, it is because it is sad, because again, it's a case of a man with such potential and drive and intelligence, and because of this sort of sense of like duty, responsibility, the ideals of, you know, this is what a good man does, sort of a thing, like, and that getting manipulated. I mean, his life was laid to waste, and, you know, he had to die so young because of that. And I want to do what I can to honor him. But I think the greater thing for me to do, I mean, I'm doing my damnedest to get those medals and awards, and then, you know, essentially as close as I can do to presenting them to him by visiting his, you know, his grave site and laying them on his headstone and that sort of thing. But beyond that, to truly honor him would be to not waste the potential I have, not waste the opportunities I have, because in one way or another, he like sacrificed so much, you know, for that to be the case. And if I truly love him, which I do, you know, him being my grandfather, if I truly love my grandfather, which I do, and if I truly love my grandmother, which I do, then, you know, to honor them, I have to make the most of myself. And I have to not give up. I have to not give up on finding a girl who's right for me, a woman who's right for me, who I'm right for, you know. And aside from all the other sort of visceral, animalistic side of things, you know, that sort of stuff, pass on my genetics, have kids, that sort of thing. You know, to not give up on that as well. Among other things. So anyways, it's been a really long video. You know, I'll update y'all when I'm actually on some sort of, you know, counter, so to speak, in terms of Nofap, but try and upload this video just so, you know, y'all know where I'm at, what I'm, you know, dealing with, what, you know, things are going on, but for those who care. But anyways, see you folks around. I'm gonna try and get some shut-eye before I have to go back to work tomorrow. So anyways, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.